Now, obviously, it would be remiss of us to have a security stage without talking about hacking. And of course, we're always aware of the fact that our devices and our software can be fraught with vulnerabilities. So it's brilliant that we are now going to have a brilliant conversation with Amit Serper, who's Director of Security Research at Sternum IoT, to talk about these real vulnerabilities, both in the hardware and in the software. And joining him, of course, will be Zach Whitaker, Security Editor of TechCrunch. A round of applause, everybody. Thank you so much.
Welcome. It's lovely to see you all here. Welcome, Amit.
Thank you. It's
nice T-shirt. I love that.
Thank you.
You've already had quite the career in security research. You've discovered hacked telcos. You have investigated adware. You helped stop the NotPetya cyber attack in 2017 as well. And now your expertise is focused on smart devices, internet-connected things. Where did your curiosity for IoT hacking come from?
So, before I was working for security companies, I spent a lot of years, so obviously, if you can, my weird name and accent and everything, I am originally from Israel. And when I was in Israel, I spent 9 years out of my life in the government, at a government intelligence agency. And this was the beginning of the previous decade, I want to say. And routers and such things became more and more and more prevalent all over the place. Not only because up until then, a router was like this big complicated thing that usually your internet service provider had, or like a big network had, and most houses had like one computer and they were connected directly to the internet. But then as technology progressed and became cheaper and people had, the iPhone came out and people started having Wi-Fi on their phone and they needed to have a router at home. I was very curious, and I was looking at those things like, this is a little computer that has all of the network's traffic going through it. Can we do something to it? Can we gain access to it? Can we shape the traffic? Can we affect the traffic? And that's how I became really focused on those things, and I used to take them apart and learn how they work, and basically they're small computers running Linux.
So tell us a bit about the work that you do now at Sternum.
Yeah, so at Sternum, basically what we do is we are a product company, and we have a product that actually makes those internet-connected devices. And again, it could be anything from your home router to like a really complicated industrial controller of some sort. Doesn't matter if it's running Linux or some kind of a real-time OS, we have a solution for it. And basically what our product does is you deploy it on this piece of hardware, and from this moment on, it monitors everything that's happening on the device, especially with regards to things that affect its security and integrity, so memory allocation, disk writes, and so on. And we can actually detect vulnerabilities and exploits before they happen, and we can mitigate them. So if you, for example, have a device that's vulnerable, whether it's at your work, at your home, whatever, at that point you're at the mercy of the vendor to release a patch. And sometimes they release patches, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they release a patch very quickly, but you don't know how to deploy that patch because it's not always a straightforward thing, such as double-clicking a file on your computer. So if that device comes with our technology inside of it, it kind of lowers the panic threshold on patching, and the vulnerability can be mitigated just by virtue of having our product installed on it, and that gives the vendor more time to react accordingly.
So then why do bad actors target IoT devices?
Because it's easy, because there's no security there. It's great.
Folks might...
Were you expecting a longer?
I was. But that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Is that these devices are so ubiquitous, they're so out there in the world, you can buy them off the shelf at your Best Buys, your Targets, and these are devices that come with vulnerabilities off the shelf.
Yes, and the vulnerabilities are there for many reasons. I mean, it could be because of shoddy programming, but it could also be because oftentimes the software stacks on those devices are ancient. For example, there's a device that I'm looking at right now. It's a brand new device. It's meant for electric vehicles, so it's literally the technology of the future. But it's coming with software stack from when I was in high school, and I'm almost 37. So it kind of puts things in perspective when you look at this device and it's running a Linux kernel from 15 years ago. It's kind of crazy.
So then folks might think about smart devices, the smart plugs they have in their house, the smart lights, the smart bulbs, and think, I don't care if the lights go on or off. Like, what does the risk really look like for those who are unaware?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And unfortunately, or luckily for our conversation, there are examples. So I think it was in 2016 or 2017 where half of the internet on the east coast of the US was sort of down because a bunch of internet-connected devices, such as security cameras, Roombas, whatever you want, got taken over by attackers and those devices, because again, these are little computers. They have a CPU, they have an operating system, they have an internet connection. So once you can write code on those things, it's as if you control a regular computer. And these devices were used to basically DDoS Dyn, which was one of the biggest DNS providers of the internet, basically rendering one of the core components of the internet on the eastern seaboard kind of useless.
So many websites went down. Spotify went down. I think Reddit went down. There were banks and organizations that were relying on Dyn went down because of the cyber attack that...
A bunch of Roombas.
A bunch of Roombas. So just recently, we saw the excellent research that you did on a popular smart plug, which has an internet connection and can be remotely switched on and off via an app. You disclosed the vulnerability to the company, but my understanding is there was no fix that they issued, or at least yet.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So what happened is we took this device, and one of the things that we're doing in my team is we're looking at popular devices, and we're saying, okay, if this is a popular device, and you can gather that information from a lot of places. By the way, if you go to like a devices page on Amazon and you look at the amount of reviews, like that gives you a good number. And so we take these popular devices and we take them apart and we start looking at the firmware, which is the code that actually runs on the device, and we analyze it, and usually there are like really bad vulnerabilities there. So bad that I have very intimate relationship with those vulnerabilities. I have one of those tattooed on my arm. And we often find them fairly quickly, and then we say, okay, if this is a popular device and we have a vulnerability that we can exploit and we can trigger and we can run arbitrary code on it, what could be the ramifications of it? So we found a vulnerability like that on this popular smart electrical plug. And again, this is a product that was meant for people to, if you have a lamp or a fan or whatever and you want to remote control it from your phone, you just plug your device into that device and you plug that into the electrical socket and there you go. So we disclosed this vulnerability to the vendor, and the vendor said, and it took them a while to respond. They had they were working with one of the bug bounty companies, and we disclosed this vulnerability through one of those companies and haven't heard anything from them for like, I want to say 3 weeks. And then I was at a conference in DC, and the CEO of that bug bounty company literally sat next to me. And I was like, oh.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you here.
Yeah.
We've got business to talk
he was
about.
like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, I may need your help. We disclosed this thing. We didn't hear back from the vendor. And he just tapped his phone, and a day later, I got a response. And the response was, this product is end of life. We're not going to do anything with it. Now, this company never bothered to tell anyone that this product was end of life. It's still being sold. I mean, I went to Best Buy like a month before and got it.
I have these very same devices in my house.
Yeah. Did you ever get a notification?
Did not get a software update.
Anymore?
No, not at all.
Well, now you know this.
Now I know this. But what I find so bizarre about this is that these are not old devices.
No.
These are 2 years old, 3 years old max.
Yeah.
And yet it still seems like there needs to be considerable encouragement from security researchers to try and get these security issues fixed.
Yes. So, I imagine that when you disclose such thing, they would at least acknowledge it or say, okay, we will release an out-of-bound patch, and it didn't happen. When that didn't happen, the press, covered it. You covered it too, and that caused a lot of ruckus over on social media, especially on Reddit. Like a lot of people on Reddit were like, okay, I'm done with this company. I'm not going to buy anything. It was like a lot of posts. We were just like, sitting at work and just like watching and like, oh my God, did we do that? It's like this meme with the house burning down and then there's this girl smiling to the camera. So it's like, that's sort of like how we felt. And I think a day after all of the media covered it, they actually issued a response to The Verge, I think, and they said, following that publication, we're actually going to issue an out-of-band patch. I don't think that patch was released until this very day. It's been, 6 months?
I still haven't got an update on my phone. I checked this morning.
Yeah.
Still nothing.
So, good job.
So there will be folks in the audience now who might be in a situation where they are at a company, a startup, they find a security issue, maybe they face some internal company pressure to ignore it, to meet deadlines, to meet a milestone. What advice would you give them?
It's kind of a tough question. I mean, would you as a developer, as someone who's passionate about security, would you lose your job over it? I don't know. I don't think it's my place to give this advice. I can only give advice to those companies that if your product is popular enough, there are a lot of curious people like me, and some of those people are way smarter than I am, and they can come up with vulnerabilities and exploits pretty quickly. So I think that it's in the best interest of those companies to actually work with the research community, work with companies that do security research, have bug bounty programs. But even if you have those programs, stand behind your own products. If someone is disclosing a critical vulnerability that affects an entire product line, because we believe that the vulnerability that we found, the one you talked about with the smart plugs, this is only one product of this company. They have a few other products, and they share a lot of the components, a lot of the code. So we believe that this same vulnerability affects other products from the same product line. And if at this point you're like, oh well, it's end of life, we don't take care of it anymore, then what's the point of having a security program? What's the point of having a bug bounty? Like, why are we pretending? So this is extremely frustrating for me as a security practitioner because I care about those things and a lot of other people care about those things and no one else cares about those things, especially not the vendors. So this is kind of a weird situation.
Then who is responsible ultimately for Internet of Things security?
Well, I think that the responsibility lies with the vendors. I mean, if you are as a vendor, let's say that for a moment I am one of those companies and I'm creating this smart plug. I have the option of creating a brand new product with a modern software stack. But of course, it's easier for me to go on GitHub or to go to like an older solution that was made years ago or with an older software stack that's full of vulnerabilities. That would be easier for me as a company. The time to market would be shorter. We're dealing with a software stack that we know. But if I am as a vendor pushing a product with the Linux kernel from 15 years ago and with a bunch of libraries from 18 years ago, this is all taken from examples that some of them I even told you about in person. I will be in the wrong here. And if there will be a big hack, which will be a result of that negligence, then I think that the vendor should be responsible for that. And there should be, I think, regulations, just like you have regulations on seatbelts and airbags and other things that keep you safe. This is 2023, almost 2024. Those things that are surrounding us can be used against us.
Yeah, I want to stay on that point really because, as we know, IoT security has historically been largely a trash fire, and security these days is not much better. I think is fair to say to some extent. At this point, should IoT security face that regulation from government, and so that there is at least a baseline level of security standards?
Absolutely, and I think it's starting to happen. And for example, with medical devices, which is something that at Sternum, at our company, we're dealing with quite a lot. There is new regulation that is requiring from the makers of various medical devices to have certain security standards and protocols and such, like our product, for example. So you do see that starting to happen, but even if you have this regulation and even if you have rules and laws and whatever, how will you enforce it? Like if you go on to Best Buy and you buy a device with a default password that can't be changed, yes, this happens. I mean, who are we blaming here? Who is going to be responsible? This unnamed company in China that makes these products and they don't respond to emails when you tell them that they have security issues. So I think that, again, the responsibility should lie on the vendor, but we as consumers, if these are consumer devices that we're dealing with, or if we're professionals and this is like some kind of like an industrial control thing that you use, I think that we all should be aware and vigilant to these devices and the risk that they might introduce to our environment.
A few weeks ago on Mastodon, you posted that a particular device was, I just want to quote one of the worst things I've seen throughout my career, which sounds like it's saying a lot. You're now in that disclosure process. Why was that one of the worst things you've seen?
Yeah, so all of the examples that I gave here in the past couple of minutes, so it's all of that and more. So for example, this is a device, and I'm trying to be careful here because we're still in the middle of a disclosure process. So this is a device that you plug into an electric vehicle, and this device is very prevalent. So you could buy this device to your home, right? But there are also public instances of that device, and all of those devices, they share the same code. And they share the same authentication keys. Meaning if you have one device, you took it apart, you managed to get it into the firmware and take the keys, the authentication keys from the device, you can connect to each one of those thousands, if not more, of the available devices out there. And you can also connect to the company's network with those authentication keys and allegedly do really bad things with it. These are devices that are, connected to high voltage power. What could possibly go wrong? And as I said, we're in the middle of a disclosure process, but it was, honestly, it was just like a bad thing after another, after another, after another. And at one point, and I even told like my bosses when they were like, okay, are you continuing the research on that thing? And I'm like, you know what, I mean, I could, but I don't see the point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty bad as it is. I mean, so I'll have another 2 really, really bad critical findings. I mean, okay, they first need to respond to our emails.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing.
Have they responded to you yet?
So we disclosed it, I want to say a little over 3 weeks ago. They responded, I think after a day. They were like, oh, thank you so much. We'll go through it. And there was like a list of people on the thread. And it's like, oh, this person will reach out to you. This person will reach out to you next week. It's been over 2 weeks. I haven't heard from them. So it's going great.
So going great so far. So that's an example, perhaps, of a company not doing IoT security that well or could be doing better. In your experiences and your kind of background and what you've seen over the years, which companies do IoT security right, if any?
Some are trying. I mean, no. The company that the one we talked about with the smart plug. Can I say their name here? I mean,
yeah, of course.
It's published. Yes. So Belkin, Wemo. So I remember when I bought their first version of this smart plug, I was actually surprised by their firmware update process that is almost like hands-free. Like you'll have a message on your phone saying, oh, there's a new firmware version.
Yep.
Tap here to update, and you just do it, and it updates. So that is good. That is a step in the right direction. You have some companies doing it, but usually it comes with a higher price point. So like if you'll go to Best Buy and you'll buy, for example, like a $30 router, don't expect much. If you opt into like higher grade stuff, such as So like what I have at home, for example, is like this almost like a office grade level networking equipment. Their firmware update process is fully automatic. I don't even know that it happens. Like I just get like an email, oh, you know, it was updated last night at 4 a.m. Okay, cool. So that is great. Usually companies that have had bad experiences with bad hacks or vulnerabilities will try to be better at it, but unfortunately there's no golden standard. I can't tell you like, oh, you know, company A is amazing, company B is like they're all kind of bad.
And to your point, though, there are medical devices that have to meet that particular threshold of US government standards. So I think some of those potentially are doing better.
Yes, but those requirements are pretty new. Like they're maybe a year old, maybe.
And so that will take time for
Yeah,
things to
so it
trickle
takes
down.
time until it comes down. And there's also the field that I'm in is kind of weird because it's very important and people understand that it's important, but it's also kind of hard to sell. So I hope that these regulations will make it easier to both explain how severe the problem is and also help companies such as ours exist and help other companies be more secure. So it's sort of like a symbiotic relationship.
I think that over the years there have been plenty of devices with an internet connection that probably shouldn't have had one. Can you give us an example of a few devices maybe that should not have an internet connection? I think there are having an internet connected device increases the attack surface dramatically.
Yeah, so a lot of devices, I mean, by saying internet connection, I mean, a lot of devices can connect to a network. Wireless, Ethernet cable, whatever. At the end of the day, it's TCP IP packets going on from side to side. I think that when you're saying should not be connected to the internet, it's literally that. They should not be accessible from the public internet. And unfortunately, there's like a million examples. There's a really good talk from a few years ago by a friend of mine. His name is Dan Tentler, Vis. He had a talk about wild things he found on Shodan.
Shodan Safari.
Exactly.
Yes.
And he found everything from like people's smart homes to huge controllers that control dams or traffic lights, or I don't know.
Webcams in offices.
Yeah, physical barriers that pop out of the ground. So a lot of those things are connected, and no one cares. It's like it's incredible how simply nobody cares. Like you would expect that someone would care. No.
What would get people to care more, besides potentially the worst things happening, cyber attacks and hacks?
I think that worst things happening. I mean, look, if you look at what happened in Ukraine in 2017 with NotPetya, while I was involved in that and I found a way to stop it, and I was in touch with the Ukrainian authorities back at the time, I didn't know until I read Andy Greenberg's book, Sandworm. I didn't really know what were the ramifications that happened there. So like things didn't work. People wanted to go to the ATM to get money. That didn't work. People wanted to take the train. That didn't work. So like once those things will affect our lives, and those things happen in other countries, it just didn't happen here. Yet. Well, there were a few small ransomwares, and I think here in San Francisco even.
There've been a few, yeah. Of course.
But until like something really serious is going to happen, I think that we're all still going to be like sort of casual about it. I mean, a couple of years ago in Massachusetts, where I live, there was like a gas pipeline explosion, and like people's gas ovens exploded, and people started saying, "This is a cyber attack. This is a cyber attack," which it wasn't. But what if it was, or what if it will happen again and it will be a cyber attack? So that's sort of something to be scared of, I guess.
So with just a minute left really on the clock, what advice would you give to device makers? What common flaws or errors are they making? How much time do you have?
When you develop your product, just don't, because a lot of those products are using third-party libraries or code that was written by other people, or even open source code that they're not really supposed to use. But I don't know, for some reason they always use the most vulnerable code from like ages ago. And like even this product I'm looking at right now, it has it's using some piece of code that was taken from a repository online. Again, brand new product, connects to electric cars, and it's running a piece of code from 2006, while the same person who maintained this code supported it and released new versions until 2018. So like, why? So this is something I really don't understand. So I think that the most important thing is use recent code, audit that code, look actively for vulnerabilities, perform pen tests. Don't wait for people like me to embarrass you because you're going to have a bad time. So I think that this is like the best advice I can give. And also, there are companies such as ours, Sternum, that we have solutions for those things. So also, if you don't really trust your code and you think that you can't really handle it well, go to someone that can help you with it.
Heed this warning. Thank you so much, Amit Serper.
Thank you.
Thank you.